This,
Big old report for now.
yeah,
You do.
right there. Right, yeah, good. Yeah.
Build a few trees.
Black and white one. That's good for not the same holding it. So it's something for.
Well, look at her.
No, he's lucky he's just got that. I gotta Smack really
It's like a conflict. Were they not?
Yeah, why are they sitting in the chair? I can sit between you.
Yeah, she was. Everything out of us.
I'll ask.
Right. I
Yeah.
Last session. Last session. Huh? Especially
Monitor the questions until the very end.
Same building upstairs, or the upstairs. And they do. Yep. And so always had to go there for this. One report, like,
it's not moving.
Yeah, well, the supposed that's all the netting is, and so it feels like the.
Good evening. Good evening. Yeah, John, we're ready to work on, right? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all. Thank you for being here on this beautiful summer evening. There have to be other things to do tonight, so we really appreciate you being here. Thanks for your ongoing commitment to your communities and to study. We do appreciate you being here. Is there anybody who hasn't attended the previous meeting? Everybody knows the format now? Okay, so the purpose of tonight's meeting really is to review the draft report. The report was sent out to the committee members a week and a half ago. And we're going to go through the highlights of that report and then open it up to questions and comments from the committee. And then after that, questions and comments from anybody who's in attendance that may have comments or questions. This has been a long process, and we've been through a number of different topic areas through our meetings, and this really is the culmination of the committee's work. Take a look at the report that Deb and I have put together and really built as we go on from one meeting to the next. And so, you've got copies of the report. It's probably 120, 130 pages long. We are not going to go through every page of that report. What we've tried to do tonight is to just pick out the highlights of the report that hopefully gives the essence of what's contained in the report, and then hopefully respond to any questions or comments that you may have. So that's what's on the agenda for this evening. A couple of housekeeping things before we begin. Our last meeting was a few weeks ago about staffing and finance, and we sent out minutes. Anybody have any issues with respect to the minutes? The meeting notes that went out from the last meeting? We didn't hear from anybody, so okay. We'll assume those are okay. Deb is passing out sign-up sheets. When I come to the last meeting, oftentimes I just bring the report with me, and instead of carrying that, walking around that big envelope that I walk around every other meeting. Problem is that the sign-up sheets and the name tags are both in that big envelope. They're right on my desk at home. I know exactly where they are, but they are not here. So we've got a committee sign-up that's going around. If you would sign in, we'd appreciate that. And then anybody who is here as an attendee, if you would please print your name on the list that's going around so that we can read your name when we get back to circles. So I think that's it by way of opening. Is that okay? Okay. So before we get into the report, there are a couple of slides that I do want to go through with you that are really follow-up items from the last committee meeting, where there were some questions that were asked about a couple of tables that really were not correct at the last meeting. And at that time, I agreed that I would update the tables. And so I'm going to go through those with you tonight before we get into the body of the report. I'll do this quickly because these tables will show up again later on in the presentation. Yeah, so this table, this is a listing of building administrators, support staff supervisors, district office support staff, like finance people, like the treasurer, like the district clerk. This is the table that we put these positions in together. And somebody said last time that they didn't think the table was correct, and they were absolutely right. We were given some information that did not contain one of the positions that currently exists in the two districts. This table is now a corrected table from last time. We believe that it does contain all positions, and so I'm not going to go through all of them with you, but you can see superintendent's position, the superintendent's secretary, the district clerk, principal positions, custodial positions, business positions, cafeteria positions. Again, we believe that this now represents an accurate listing of those positions that currently exist in the 2 school districts. With our apologies to Robin, who I think it was her position that was left off next time. So we now have her in there. Bottom line is that you can see that this group of positions that we've put together, there are a total of 10.25 of these people at Livingston Manor, and a total of 8 of these people in Roscoe, for a total of 18.25 positions. Also last time, someone asked about the salaries for these positions. And so this next table in your handout is an overview of those salaries. And what you see is that we've taken the numbers of positions, the total salary cost, and found the average salary. So the average salary of this group of 18 people is right around $100,000. We then took that 55% fringe benefit cost that we're using for all staff in both districts, added that to the average salary, so that the average cost for all of these 18 people is right here, about $2.8 million for this group. So that was the salary information that was not included last time. I had not done this work at that time. Somebody asked a question about salaries, so you can see again, Paul's talking about this group of people represents about $2.8 million worth of salaries and benefits. The following table in your handout, the third one before we get to the report, shows the recommendation of what this group of people might look like should the school districts decide to merge. Now, this table is really a combination of our thinking about what it takes to manage a school district the size of the merged Livingston Manor and Roscoe, as well as frankly a conversation with Mr. Evans, who knows what it takes to run a district like this on a day-to-day basis. So we had some conversations, and this is what we believe would be appropriate should the school districts merge. Now, one of the places where there's oftentimes a major reduction in terms of a position and salaries with the superintendent, because in most merger studies, 2 school districts have 2 superintendents. However, since your 2 school districts are already sharing the superintendent, the assumptions made here that will continue. So that's one little difference in this table compared with most studies that we do. There would only be one. Right now, there's a superintendent, secretary, district clerk at Livingston Manor, and there's one in Roscoe for a total of 2. If the districts merged, we would only need one of those positions for a reduction of 1.0 positions. Again, I don't want to go through all of these, take the time to go through all of these, it's warm, but I will tell you that each, we're talking about an elementary school in Roscoe and a secondary school here in Livingston Manor. The administration of those buildings would be that each building would have a principal, elementary principal, junior, senior high school principal, and each building would have an assistant principal. In addition to being the assistant principal, each assistant would also carry additional duties. That is, one of the elementary assistant principal would also be a CSE chair, and the middle school, high school assistant principal would also be the director of athletics. So in terms of Again, overall coverage of the buildings, principal and an assistant principal with additional duties in each building. Again, you can follow this down through, but again, get to the bottom line. Again, currently at Livingston Manor, there are 10.25 positions. In Roscoe, there are 8 for a total of 18.25. Should a merger occur, we believe it would be appropriate to reduce this group of people from 18.25 positions to 16 positions. So that would be a reduction of 2.25 positions in this group. And we'll show you the financial impact as we go a little further down in the study. So that simply brings us up to date on correcting the table that was wrong in the last meeting. Again, we apologize for that. Adding the salary information that was requested, and from saying not only what does it look like now, but what might it look like down the road. Those are the 3 questions that were answered tonight as follow-up to the last meeting. So, I'm going to stop there. Let that be the first couple of slides in terms of reviewing the draft report.
Need one more. So let me first start, perhaps most importantly, with a thank you to these folks that are sitting here at the table tonight, and a few that are not able to be with us tonight. I believe Danielle is joining remotely. She's there in spirit, at least not physically there. But this is the committee representatives. Thank you to all of you for taking your time over these 6 or so months to serve on this committee. It's a very important work. We appreciate the dedication. We appreciate the questions, the thoroughness about this, with which you've done your job as committee members. And I'm sure, even though our formal committee meetings will cease tonight, your work will continue out in your respective communities, in your school communities and in the greater community, with fielding questions from folks and trying to provide accurate information as people think about what this merger process should look like going forward. So thank you sincerely to all of you for serving on the committee. Just some reminders from way back at our first meeting that you may remember us talking about 2 kinds of merger studies. There is a centralization merger and there is an annexation merger. This is a centralization merger. This is where there are 2 school districts will cease to exist in those entities and will join together to make one entirely new school district. It is not one district kind of absorbing the other district. This is forming of a new school district, new Board of Education, and second bullet there, new policies, new collective bargaining agreements, and so on. It is not where one district kind of takes over the other. And all of that is kind of saying what the last bullet here says is that the that the 2 communities really are equal partners in creating this new school. So the first section that we talked about, that's one of the sections that I worked on, is that of the enrollment history projections. You'll recall our discussion, and also in the report, there's several tables, but we kind of chose to share just a couple with you tonight as a reminder what we talked about many months ago. The first table that you see on slide number 10 is the enrollment history and projections for Livingston Manor. Generally speaking, the history up through from 2016 to 21-22, the now past school year, the enrollment has declined slightly. It's down 14 students overall in that time frame, which translates to down about 3.4%. And then if you look at it going from last year forward with the projections to the 28-29 school year, is projected to generally continue to decline. As we spoke about at the time, the further out you go, the less reliable that data becomes because there is no live birth rate data. One of the factors that go into developing these tables. So in the broad, very broad terms, there's nothing here to indicate that enrollment will spike up. It will likely continue to decline to some degree.
If you look to the right of the title of the slide, you'll see a number in parentheses for all of the slides we're going to go through tonight. That's the page number in the report where this particular item is found. So if you just love this table and want to read more about it, go to page 13 and that will take you page 13 to report. That is where it's found. And then also you're gonna see a ton of numbers again tonight. Every slide is gonna have a little box in it. If you get lost in all of these numbers that are on this page, a little box on every slide is the summary, one thing to take away from that slide. If you don't remember all of the numbers, just take away that enrollment's gone down, probably gonna continue to go down. That's what the little box tells you. So those are two little key things on every slide as you go through it. That's what those things mean.
I'm going to repeat these for the folks locally that may have heard anything or catching that. I have to say that. The number in parentheses references the page number in the final report, and the box, there's a box on each slide that gives one summative point to be taken from that slide. Oops, I'm sorry. Roscoe, same slide essentially. Except for the Roscoe data being included. And the pattern is very similar to what we've just seen in Livingston Manor. The enrollment decline in historically by 26 students, that's a drop of about 11%. Projection is to continue further decline. The numbers in the table show down 33 kids and percentage of 15.6%. Again, really the takeaway here is that there's nothing to give you the idea that at some point you would anticipate an enrollment spike, which would somehow make your buildings larger than you would expect to be based on the data. We looked at in the report, so we looked at the county projections. We looked at data around homeschool students for each district. Students that are educated outside of the buildings here in the two districts. And again, there is nothing that would indicate significant or any really enrollment increases that would need to be, you would need to be concerned about. So this is just a summary slide that shows what the projections are broken down into two grade levels. Whereas Ellen's have been talking about elementary in Roscoe and in the Roscoe building, and then the secondary school in this Manor building. And this is what the projections would look like in each building. So you can see that there's continues to be a slight decline. Sometimes what we see is increases in one building and decreases in another, the other. And in this case, there is a somewhat gradual decrease in enrollment and decline in enrollment in each building.
May I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're looking at the number of 552 students by 2028, what would your recommendation be? We're not really planning a year or two out for a merger. 5 years out, we have 48 fewer students, 49 fewer students. Would your recommendation still be the same as this building being 7 through 12, Roscoe being pre-K through 6, or at that point with the 50 fewer students, would you make an alternative recommendation?
Okay, so the question is, given the numbers that are here as far as the utilization of each of the current buildings, would it make sense, given what we project for Roscoe to remain the K6 building and Livingston Manor to remain the 712 building? and I'm looking at Alan because he can certainly chime in on facilities, but there were reasons why the Lakes Manor building was selected for secondary programming, and so from what I know, and I'm over here, I would say our recommendation will remain as it is there. Okay, and we'll get that in the facility section as well again. So we'll come back. But I don't anticipate that. And the last thing I really wanted to hit here, and I can't stress it enough, is as we spoke about at the time, the projections are just that, projections. So it is important to go in annually and update that. Look at what we projected, for example, in 22-23. In the fall, you're going to have real numbers for the two districts. Look at that and 22-23. Look at that data in October and see where it stands with what we projected for 22-23. And it's going to be off by a few, I'm guessing. It usually is. But continue to do that process going forward, whether there's learning or there's not. It still is important to keep that data. Update that, get it updated. And we'll be on the microphone out here. Anyone lost the microphone?
Okay, we're going to now talk about the educational program, and again, it's just to highlight. If you were here for the meeting where we talked about a program that took a good couple of hours, we're going to try to do that in 5 or 10 minutes, so not these just highlights. But we started by looking at the elementary program, and that's what this top table is, a look at the elementary program that currently exists in the 2 school districts. And what we see is that, pick a grade, third grade, there are 2 sections of third grade in Livingston Manor and 1 section of third grade in Roscoe. The 2 sections of third grade in Livingston Manor have 14 and 13 students, and 1 section of third grade in Roscoe has 10. Again, we take a snapshot. We understand these numbers will change a little bit, but we take a snapshot, and this is where we were. We took that snapshot, and what you see is that for these grades, without pre-K, we do not include pre-K because it's the enrollment in pre-K is very different than any other grades. So from kindergarten through 6th grade, there are 14 sections in Livingston Manor, 2K, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 14 sections in Livingston Manor, and there are 7 sections, 1 per grade level in Roscoe. So as you put those 2 together, what we find is that across the 2 school districts, there are 21 sections, and you can see that the average class size in these sections is very reasonable. 13.6 and 15.1, very, very small average class sizes across the 2 districts. The table below that looks at what the elementary program might look like if the 2 school districts decided to merge. And again, what we've done is to say this is currently where Livingston Manor is, this is currently where Roscoe is. But if you put them together and put all the elementary students in one building, what might it look like? And again, you can go grade by grade. Pick any grade, pick 3rd grade again. 3rd grade has got 14 students and 13 students and 10 students, a total of 38 students in grade 3 across the 2 districts. If there's a merger, it would be pretty easy to reduce that from 3 sections to 2 sections, one with 18 students, one with 19 students. That's the idea behind this whole table. And what we find going grade by grade is that while currently we have 14 plus 7 or 21 sections of elementary classes across the two districts, if there was a merger and we combined some of the class sections, we could end up with 17 classrooms or a reduction of 4 classroom positions. In doing that, you will also see that the class size doesn't bump up to 30 or 32 kids in a class. The average class size, even with those 4 reductions, 4 class reductions right here, from 21 to 17, you can see that the average class size is instead of 13.6 or 15.1, goes to 17.4, still very, very reasonable class sizes. And yet, at the elementary level, it would save for teaching positions. Okay, we then took a look at the secondary course offerings, grades 7 through 12. And again, you were here, you will remember that we looked at every single course that was offered in both districts, in every department, English, social studies, math, science, blah, 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 the whole thing. Tonight, I'm just showing you English, try to cut down on the time. And what we did in this table was to say English 7, how many sections of English 7 are there currently? Well, there are 2 sections of English 7 in Livingston Manor, each with 13 students, and there's 1 section of English 7 in Roscoe with 20 students. And we looked at all these courses, all the number of sections, all the way through here. What you'll see is that for English 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, both districts offer all those courses. When you get past English 12, you see schools, districts that start offering electives. Sullivan County Community College English, college composition. Here's a journalism course that's offered in Livingston Manor. It's not offered in Roscoe. And here's a documentary studies program that's offered in Roscoe, but not offered in Livingston Manor. Those are the electives. Absolutely common. What you see up here is that different districts usually offer the same core courses, grades 7 through 12. By the way, the social studies table looks very similar, the math table looks pretty similar, the science table looks similar. Both districts offer 4 courses, and then each district offers some electives. What you find is that as you get to the elective levels, the enrollment in those classes is smaller. We'll go back and talk about that in just a minute. Generally speaking, the core academic courses in each subject area, English, math, social studies, those enrollments are always higher than those enrollments. And of course, the question is, we'll talk about this in a few minutes, how long can school districts continue to offer elective courses for students that have 4 or 5 or 6 students? That's why this is a really important number. Can that continue with those numbers getting smaller and smaller? Yes.
Just a quick question. Did you take a look at, let's say Roscoe, for instance, English 8, 21 students, English 10, 19 students. Did you take a look at the percentage of students that have special needs in that group, or these 504s, or just the number?
Questions that we take, that we break out students with special education, IEPs, 504s. No one did not. We took the enrollment claims. And that will have an impact on a variety of classes in a variety of little ways. We think in a pretty small way with all this, but that's what we do. So this whole study is based on this idea in a little small summary box, and that is all the secondary courses for both districts have some low enrollments. I've just talked about that. You can see those here. And there's also an assumption that all current courses that are currently offered in either district would continue to be offered in the merged district, regardless of enrollment. So we're said another way, this study does not cut any small enrollment classes. The assumption is that anything that's offered in either district now would be offered if there's a merger. And somebody would look at whether or not there's a possibility to offer more electives, but certainly everything that the Roscoe students have would now become available to the Livingston Manor students. These two courses, for example, and everything that's available to the Livingston Manor students would now become available to the Roscoe students, those two courses, for example. So that's the concept. Everything that's currently offered in either district, English, math, social studies, blah, 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 continues to be offered. Nothing's been cut. Everybody gets the best of everything. We then put together, like we did for the elementary program, look at whether or not certain sections could be reduced because of the efficiency that comes about because two school districts are merging. And we used, again, we didn't put 35 or 40 kids in a global study, social studies class. And we limited the class size to no more than 22. That's the number. So we're not talking about a big class size to accomplish this. But just by combining a class with 9 and a class with 8, maybe one class with 17, that kind of thing, like we did the elementary grades, this is where we end up in the secondary school. And these are the number of sections that just by combining smaller classes with slightly larger classes could be saved. And what you see is that there are 22 sections of classes across these areas that could be saved. Again, no more than 22 students in a section. We believe this would equate to about 2 teaching positions at the secondary level, probably an English position, probably a science position, which appears to be where the greatest reductions could be made. So again, simply the efficiency of bringing the 2 districts together could create probably 22 sections of efficiency, probably save 2 teaching positions, and probably provide the opportunity without any additional cost of adding even more electives for all the classes that Livingston Manor has currently and all the classes that Roscoe has currently. We also looked at athletics. Want you to know, we look at it, understand that it's very important in any community. You are already sharing most of your sports, either between Livingston Manor and Roscoe, or between Livingston Manor, Roscoe, and Downsville. There are some sports, primarily the basketball courses. And here, baseball, a couple of baseball courses. Every place that doesn't have an asterisk is not shared, but you can see most of these have asterisks at the end of it, which means those are shared. Not sure we can do much more exacting analysis of what happened with athletics. I think you're very safe to assume that everything that's currently offered in either district in athletics will continue to be offered. And if anything, there'd be a possibility that you might be able to add teams, either in the form of different sports or perhaps at a different level, where you've got varsity and modified. If more kids get involved, maybe there's a possibility of having a JV team. I don't see any way where you go backwards. It seems pretty clear that the only thing that would happen would be that we have at least what's available now, and perhaps more from an athletic standpoint. Okay, so the summary is good array of core courses in both districts that have pretty good enrollments. You've got enrollments, you've got electives in both districts where enrollments are small. As an aside, you'll see it in the report, about 40% of the courses at Livingston Manor currently have fewer than 10 students in them. Not talking about special ed, not talking about resource program, not talking about the ag schools, talking about courses. Well, 40% of the courses in Livingston Manor have fewer than 10 students. About 50% of the courses in Roscoe have fewer than 10 students. So somehow, somebody's going to have to pay some attention to how long you can continue to offer what, if you don't merge, what you're currently offering, knowing that these enrollments and these elective courses are becoming smaller. So solid offerings now in the core, nice array of electives, but with small enrollments. If you merge, everything that's currently available now in either district would be available to the students in the merged district. That's the summary of the program. And probably going to save 4 elementary positions and conservatively 2 secondary positions. We'll come back to that in a second. Here's the facilities piece. We took a look at Livingston Manor building. And what we spend our time looking at is, this is the number of core academic classrooms, including these grade levels, pre-K through 6, English, social studies, math, science, and there are full-size classrooms, about 27 classrooms for these courses to be offered in Livingston Manor. The other full-size classrooms, there are 16 more of those that house home economics, special ed, well, you can read these, art, music, the business office. But what you see is that in Livingston Manor, there are about 43 full-size classrooms. Not all exactly the same, some are a little bit smaller, some are a little bit bigger, but figure 43 full-size classrooms in Livingston Manor. Those are the important numbers. It's this 27 for these purposes, these 16 full-size classrooms for these purposes, and 27 plus 16, 43 full-size classrooms in Livingston Manor. We did the same thing for Roscoe. Full-size classrooms for core academic areas. We got pre-K, K1 and 3 replaces English, social studies, blah, blah, blah. You can see there are 16 of those full-size classrooms in Roscoe for those purposes. The other full-size classrooms in Roscoe are used for these purposes. And here are another 16 classrooms. So again, the big picture is these 16 full-size classrooms plus these 16 full-size classrooms means there's a total of 32 full-size classrooms in Roscoe. Livingston Manor, around 43, Roscoe, around 32. Not surprising, Livingston Manor is a bigger district than Roscoe, has more students. You would expect, has a bigger square footage in terms of what's available in the building. You would expect it to be more full-size classrooms in Livingston Manor than Roscoe. This data just backs up what you would assume would happen. So as we put the merged district together, these are the 17 elementary classrooms we were talking about just a couple of minutes ago. And again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but we figured we need somewhere around 65 full-size classrooms. Well, that's an important number. You got 65 full-size classrooms, bigger than Roscoe, it's got 32, and it's bigger than Livingston Manor that has 43. So the first question is, can you put everybody in one building? And here's the answer, you can't. There just isn't enough room to put 600 students and offer the same kind of program we're offering now into one building. So the recommendation is that the merged district would require 2 buildings with a recommendation that the elementary school, the house in Roscoe, and the secondary school be located in Livingston Manor. Why do we say that? Go back to the question earlier. Number one, Livingston Manor is a larger building. It has more classrooms than Roscoe has. It takes more rooms to offer a secondary program than it does a largely self-contained elementary program. When you make room for things like second languages, home and career skill opportunities, technology classes that have to be offered at the junior high grades as well as the high school grades. Usually more gym space. We also look at athletic fields, which for a variety of reasons, and it's all in the report. The athletic fields, we would want the secondary school to be located where the athletic fields are probably a little better. And it's our view that for a variety of reasons that are in the report, the athletic fields are better in Livingston Manor than they are in Roscoe. So for all those reasons, that was what was behind selecting Livingston Manor to be the secondary school, Roscoe to be the elementary school. Clearly, neither building on its own is big enough to hold the merged district population.
Okay, so I want to talk just for a couple of minutes about our discussions around transportation. Transportation is always a challenging conversation when it comes to these merger studies. It's not as obvious how it might work as perhaps on the, for example, the facilities discussion. It was pretty clear that all of the classrooms won't fit in any one building. That's kind of relevant. So with transportation, we noted that both districts currently contract with Rolling D for transportation services. Nick was here, I believe, at our last meeting, and we appreciate his participation, taking time to come in and share his perspective with all of you and with us. So what he did say was that he would recommend continuing with your single tier routing system so that all kids are brought in on one trip as opposed to a 2-tier system, which would bring in the elementary kids at one time, buses would go back out, gather up the secondary students and bring them into the district. So continuation of a single tier system. The other thing we talked about is that it is likely, I guess I'll go so far as to say that some students would have a slightly longer bus ride than they do today. Some students may experience a slightly shorter bus ride than they do today. But it would depend on how the newly merged district establishes the parameters on which to base its routes. So right now, Livingston Manor has slightly different parameters for who it picks up, when it picks up, the distances at which it picks up, than does Roscoe. So the first thing would be for the merged district to agree on what those common parameters are. And then the district can start to work with the contractor to develop routes as far as what they might look like in this merged district. And that's something that Rolling B staff have agreed that they're going to continue to work on after we're gone, after Adam and I are gone. They're going to continue to do some work with the 2 districts now in an effort to better hone in on what that routing would look like in a merged district. So that's an ongoing process. But the first thing would be to establish those common rules or parameters that Nick mentioned when he was here last time. There will be some efficiencies with bus routing in a merged district. But I think the most obvious ones would be transportation for out-of-district student placements, where right now each district is, for the most part, taking their children to go out of district to school on their own on its own. So Livingston Manor students, there's a plan in place for them to get where they need to go. Same thing for us. They take their kids, Willoughby takes them where they need to go, and that's the way it works. There may be opportunities, I would expect there would be opportunities for a merged district. You know, those same children will still be here, but now perhaps they can go on one bus instead of on two. So those kinds of efficiencies, I think, will exist. There will be some cost savings related to that. However, the other side of that we talk about is what getting kids to school in district would look like. And we talked about a shuttle system where you bring the children into one point and then you use a couple or three, whatever it takes, buses to move those children. For example, the Livingston Manor routes run as they do today. Livingston Manor children come in as they do today, but then they would get on a shuttle bus and for elementary students and go to the rest of the building, and vice versa for the rest of the Manor for secondary. The committee talked, as did we talked with Nick as well, about maybe it's better to simply extend the current routes and leave kids right on the bus that they are on, take them to whatever building they need to attend, and do it that way. That's something that will be part of the ongoing evolution of the transportation routing process. But I think for right now, what's important to acknowledge is that there will likely be some increase in the cost for transportation. So as I mentioned before, for the sake of discussion and factoring this in to the financial pieces, we're going to use the shuttle system. I want to be really clear. That's not because I think that's what the district should use. That is one option. That is numbers that we have gotten from Rolling B. We put some identifiable costs to it as a kind of a placeholder to acknowledge that there will be some additional transportation costs likely in emergency. Definitely going to be some savings as well, but I think we'll acknowledge that there's likely to be additional costs. So with that idea in mind, so with that in mind, we talked about 3 shuttle buses for the Manor kids to go to West Elementary School, annual cost, 3 buses, and then there's transportation aid available to the district to the estimated number of 54%. So what this says here is that therefore the local cost would be 44% of the total shuttle cost of $120,000. Just doing the math leaves the cost for the elementary shuttle, we'll call it, of $52,800. The other side of that equation is that the Roscoe secondary students need to get to Livingston Manor. Again, if we were to assume this system was utilized, there would be at least 2 buses, $8,000 local cost, resulting in $35,200 costs. So the net local cost for additional transportation expenses that we factor into the financial picture that you'll see coming up is $88,000. So again, there's a lot of numbers going on there. There's a lot of math coming on there. But the takeaway point here is that there will likely, it's reasonable to expect that there would be some additional cost related to transporting the students. And it may be that the district chooses a more expensive option because they think that's what's best for their kids, and that's perfectly fine. Absolutely fine. But suffice it to say, at this point, we need to put a placeholder in for transportation costs, and these numbers are what we see here coming up in a little bit of the financial section.
Okay. The next section deals with staffing. You've heard me say this a number of times, but schools are staff-intensive organizations. 75% of any school budget is made up of staff salaries and benefits. Money is not in paper and pencils, it's not in basketballs, it's not in anything else, it's in people. And so the first thing that we look at in terms of trying to define the financial impact will be the number of staff positions in each district. And so, again, this table is presented to show you all the different types of positions that exist within the two school districts, Livingston Manor and Roscoe. Bottom line, when you get down here, you can see that between the two school districts, there's about 174 people who are employed in these two school districts. Probably aren't many businesses in either Livingston Manor or Roscoe that employ more than 174 people. Is that fair to say? So this is a big organization, each of them on their own, and obviously bigger if they come together. So about 174 people. If you were to look at the top 3 or 4 lines, this is where you see the number of teachers, the number of teaching assistants, the number of teacher aides. And of the 174 staff members, 131 are teachers, teacher aides, and teacher assistants. Exactly what you would expect it to be, exactly what you would want it to be. You want to put as much horsepower as possible, as close to the children as you can. And that translates into teachers, teacher assistants, teacher aides. So this is the overview, 174 people, 75% of those teachers, teaching assistants, teacher aides. We then took a look at the teacher's salary schedules. And a little bit complicated to compare the two salary schedules because they have different structures, but essentially the teacher's salary schedule is based on the notion that teachers' salaries increase because they serve additional years in the school district. And teacher salaries also increase because they take more professional training, usually in terms of a university graduate credit. Those are the two factors that drive teacher salaries. And what we found is we did this comparison across bachelor's, master's degree, and master's plus 30-hour areas, including longevity increases that the two different districts have, is that it's pretty complicated. And there are some places where the Livingston Manor schedule is higher, and there are some places where the Roscoe schedule is higher. It is what it is. That's okay. There are no two school districts in New York State that would have the same salary schedule. So the fact that you've got Livingston Manor and Roscoe that are two different school districts who negotiate terms and conditions of employment with the two teacher unions, absolutely understandable that the salary schedules would be different. Negotiations of salaries in New York State are reserved to the 700 school districts, each individually who negotiate those salaries. There's no state salary schedule. So look across the 700 school districts in New York State, all these schedules are different. What you have here is nothing wrong, there's nothing unusual with what you have here. As we looked at the salary impact of these teaching schedules, you can see that the average teacher salary in Livingston Manor is about $78,000, and in Roscoe, the average teacher salary is about $73,000. You can also see that the average step, which roughly equates to how long the average teacher has served in that district, you can also see that's higher in Livingston Manor than it is in Roscoe. So the fact that this average salary is a little higher in Livingston than in Roscoe, again, not surprising. At any rate, these numbers are what they are. If you put the two of them together, an average teacher salary across the two districts is about $76,000. With adding on a 55% fringe benefits cost, which is what it is for these two school districts, the cost of an average teacher is about $118,000. We said the cost of an average administrator is about $155,000. Average teacher about $118,000. As you look across the two districts, again using 55% fringe benefit costs on average. So, I'll give you an overview of and try to explain why having two different salary schedules at Livingston Manor is absolutely okay, absolutely normal, if you will. However, right now there are two separate school districts. So a third grade teacher at Livingston Manor with a master's degree might be making a different salary than a third grade teacher in Roscoe with a master's degree, and that's okay. Question is, should these two school districts merge? Now they're working for the same school district. Should every third grade teacher with a master's degree and 5 years experience be making the same salary? Or, even though they now work for the same employer, do you want teachers with the exact same background making different salaries? Well, certainly every district at least considers what it might look like if those salaries were equalized should the districts decide to merge. So now that you're one school district instead of two, now teachers who have the same number of years of experience, the same number of graduate hours, would now be making the same salary because they now work for the same school district. That's the difference. Got that? Makes sense? Why this is different? We oftentimes refer to that phenomenon as leveling up. That is, a teacher that third grade teacher, 5 years experience, master's degree, is making $1,000 more in one district than they are in the other district. If you merge and wanted to bump up that teacher $1,000, so now they're making the exact same salary with 5 years experience and a master's degree. That phenomenon is called leveling up the salaries, if you will, of people with equal qualifications with different salaries, now making them equal when they work in the same district. That is called leveling up. Leveling up is not required to be done. It is a function of renegotiating the teacher contract should the districts decide to merge. If the districts merge, and if as part of the negotiations of the contract, there's some discussion about leveling up, it doesn't all have to happen in 1 year. It could happen over 5 years. And you can say, well, here's the level up, but we're going to do 20% a year over 5 years. You don't want to spend all that money. So there are a variety of ways to get at this leveling up factor, including doing nothing. No requirement that you do it. But if you do, our estimate, most conservatively, and that's how we do our studies, we estimate conservatively, that if all teachers were leveled up to the higher salary, and that leveling up would occur the first year of the merger, this is what it would look like to level up those salaries. Here's some Livingston Manor, Roscoe data currently. If you leveled up the Roscoe teachers and the Livingston Manor teachers. This is the new payroll. The difference between the current payrolls and the level up payrolls is about $240,000. We then added another 30% fringe benefits. We didn't add 55% this time because the cost of health insurance, which is the biggest fringe benefit, doesn't change based on the salary. So we just estimated that at 25%. We said, let's use 30% for fringes, not 55. We add that in. The bottom line, here's the box. If there's a merger, if there is a decision to level up teacher salaries, if the decision is to level it up all at once in the first year of the merger, none of which has to be done, if those are the decisions, the cost to do that is about $312,000 to move everybody to a higher salary, including 30% for fringe benefits. This is the table of administrators, supervisors, district office, support staff that I showed you at the beginning of the meeting. This is the table that I've updated since the last meeting. This is the table that says that we currently have, with all these positions between Livingston Manor and Roscoe, we have 10.25 plus 8. We have 18.25 positions currently. If there is a merger, those 18.25 positions could be reduced to 16, or a reduction of 2.25 positions from this group of staff. So we conclude this section. We'll look at the financial impact of all the stuff that we've been talking about tonight. What does this mean financially? Remember, we talked about the number of positions that can be eliminated. Let me again emphasize. When we talk about the reduction of positions, we are not talking about the reduction of people. Positions are different than staff. Our recommendation is that reductions in positions equate to reductions in people through a process called attrition. And that is a position that becomes vacant doesn't result in somebody being involuntarily put out of a job. It just means that the next time there's a vacancy in that position, the position would not get filled. So our recommendation, and by the way, our experience in previous studies like this is that no one would lose a job involuntarily as a result of this merger. You say that again. No one would lose a job involuntarily as a result of this merger. Rather, the savings that we're projecting would be accomplished through attrition, that is, not filling positions when people resign. And people do resign. That table's in the chart in the report also. So positions. We talked about 4 elementary positions. A teacher, on average, costs about $118,000. If these positions turn into people, 4 times $118,000 would save about $474,000. We talked about 2 secondary teachers, perhaps an English position, perhaps a math position. 2 times $118,000 would generate another $236,000. We've also talked about the reduction of 2.25 administrative district office staff, about $155,000 each, times 2.25 or another $349,000. Bottom line, just with these 2.25 administrators, 4 elementary teachers, 2 secondary teachers. By attrition, the district could, we believe, easily save slightly over $1 million from the state.
So with that, we will bring it all together with the finance summary. We talked about finance at the last meeting. And so I picked out a few slides that I think kind of encapsulates all that we spoke about. There's probably 25 pages in the final report we'll take relating to all kinds of parts and pieces to finances in the 2 districts. But seeing we covered that last meeting, there's just a few popular news like here. So one of the first big pieces for finance is the fact that a merged district is eligible for incentive operating aid, and that's what's shown in the table. Again, this table can be found on page 110 in the final report. Fairly well, middle or latter part of the chapter. So what you see here, the number is that the first 5 years, the incentive operating aid is 40% of the combined operating aid of the 2 districts from 2006 out. And that incentive operating aid diminishes by 4% from year 6 through year 14, so that when you get in year 15, down here, 37, 38, one place you know, there is 0 incentive operating aid. The state has recognized that the transition process for the district may cost money, and they're going to give you some money to do those things, but it also needs to become, the newly created district needs to become self-sufficient. The other thing that I want to reinforce here is that this is additional aid. This is not deducted from your current aid streams of any sort that the district receives. Okay, that question, we get asked that question often, but I want to reiterate that here. So this is over 15 years, and these are hard numbers. The district would generate slightly over $7 million in incentive operating aid. That is over and above any generation. So as we look at the allocation of incentive operating aid, our recommendation is that you break the district, the merged district, would break it, generally speaking, into 3 relatively equal parts. It doesn't mean that it has to be exactly 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but relatively equal. If any one of these 3 parts is significantly greater, I think last month I used the example of one is at 80%, the other 2 at 10%. It likely will not be financially successful in the long term. So our recommendation is that we divide up this operating aid into 3 fairly equal buckets. The long-range business stability, that's going to be important. The program enhancements, Alan's touched on some of that when he's talked about the programming. And then lastly, the tax reduction piece. So as it says in the footnote there, if the board in the newly created district would need to be disciplined in how, in the planning for this and the execution of that plan, and continually review and revise to make sure that the projections for these funds are actually coming past the way it was supposed to. So these are these 3 buckets that we've talked about with the incentive operating aid. So the first bucket that we look at is the monies that could be used for program enhancements. Ellen just talked about leveling up. That would fall in here. You might want to use it for some new or expanded programming for students. New courses, new equipment in existing courses. You might want to use it for new or expanded services for students. There's a lot of emphasis in schools right now on mental health. So maybe there needs to be some additional mental health supports that you could use these funds for to get that programming on the ground. But ways in which you can better engage and serve your students, new clubs, new sports, all of that. So this is the monies that in that 1/3 model would be about over the 50 years, about $2.4 million that could be dedicated toward enhancing the student program. Next piece is long-range fiscal stability. This is critical. Again, I can't say it enough. Whatever the plan is that the district develops, it's important to continue to review and revise that plan. These are things like the reserve funds and effective utilization of those. The other key piece here that I want to emphasize is that this is one where if I were sitting in the newly merged district, I would not want to do this alone. I would want to do this in tandem with my fiscal advisor, who has a vast array of experience in this area, and I would want that person involved with the district and helping us work through that, not just in year one, but over time. So this is the long-range fiscal stability. And then lastly, this big table that we talked about next time, which I need to bring the page up. And I want to take a minute and walk through this and be sure that everyone has a good understanding. So I do want to walk through this one column at a time to be sure everyone understands it, because this really brings all of those parts and pieces that we talked about financially together. On the left side of that gray vertical bar are things that are either more funds, such as the operating aid, or savings that can be identified, and we've worked on that through the various chapters. So the year is the first column, year one. We work for the 15 years that, through which you have the incentive operating aid available to you. So this is, that second column is 1/3. Remember, this is only 1/3 of that incentive operating aid. And you'll see it declining as we talked about. First 5 years are the same, then it declines by 4% after that. The next column is the additional building aid. We cannot talk about it tonight, but you will remember from the facilities discussion that there is additional, they call, what state I call incentive building aid, that is separate from incentive operating aid, is separate from building aid. But what this is, these are funds that are available in a merged district for debt that is already in place. So if either district brings debt into a merged district, the outstanding debt is aid is paid at the higher of the two individual districts, two districts that have preceded the merged district. So in this case, the Livingston Manor building aid ratio is the higher of the two. So the ROSCO, existing ROSCO debt service is aided at a higher rate in the event of a merger. That's what's shown in this column. This is the additional incentive building aid that's generated from a merger. Next column, you just saw that number a minute ago. This is the annual staff reduction and savings. And any place you see an asterisk, we have assumed a 2% annual increase, whether it be on the expense side or the savings side. We've assumed that there's a 2.5% annual increase. So this is that 1,060,017 you saw, and then that's the expected savings through staffing. So transportation, here we go, because you saw a net load share on the slide that I presented. But this is done in two columns because there will be for transportation expense, for eligible transportation expense, there will be additional transportation aid. So that additional aid on that additional expense is reflected in this column that Ellen showed you right there. Transportation aid is paid a year in arrears, which is why you see 0 in year 1, and then it kicks in going forward from there. And lastly, there are budget efficiencies that are a table of some possible budget efficiencies, where it's elimination of current services such as policy books and independent audits and things like that, that right now each district is required to do on its own. You would no longer have to do those things in a merged district. So there is a table that shows exactly what those efficiencies will be, and that's where those numbers are coming from. So that is the plus side, if you will, in this conversation. On the right side of the gray bar would be things that we are acknowledging and planning would be subtractions, for lack of a better term, either loss of aid or additional expense. So within those budget efficiencies are some BOCES expenses, services that the districts get from BOCES. Right now, each one is having, paying its own base fee or however structure works. But if you eliminate those services, you also eliminate the corresponding BOCES aid. So we've done some estimates, for the sake of this illustration, and acknowledged that there would be a loss of BOCES aid in approximately the amounts in that column. And there's your additional transportation cost. So this is the gross cost before aid for that shuttle system that I'm using as the money placeholder for transportation. So if you take that cost and flip over to the left-hand side of some transportation aid fees, and then you see the net number that we talked about. Over there. Lastly is the leveling up, teaching salary and benefits. I always talked about that a minute ago. 312,000 and change, and that's projected forward at 2.5% annual increases. So if you add all that roll across, the total of that, this is already positive, is a good thing. So the total savings is about 1.1 million, almost 1.2 million in year 1. And you'll see that decline as because we have the aid kicking in, sorry. But as the operating aid will decline. So the takeaway here in this box would be that a merged district would generate between savings and additional revenue. You've got money that you've already got over time in incentive operating aid invested in your program. You've got 2.4 million of that money set aside as reserves for long-term fiscal stability. And lastly, you've got 2.4 million, which is the bottom of that second column, way left. That's 2,393,529. That's the 1/3 that is dedicated to the tax reduction or tax controlling the tax increase. So that's all of the financial parts come together on that one table. So now, okay, that's all well and good, but what does that mean for all of us? So we now take that number that you just saw in year 1, you're going to see again right there. So what we've done here for illustration is to take the 21-22 school year numbers. These are the real actual numbers upon which the tax levies, the tax rate was calculated for each of the districts for last fiscal year. We haven't done the new year yet. So here's Manor with Roscoe. Here's what it would be combined if they had merged with these numbers. You'll see this is a reminder that this is tax rate on true value. It's the only way we can compare two districts. because of the variabilization rates in the towns of each district. So we have to use true values. So right now, or actually not last year, Manners true value tax rate was $15.71 a thousand. Roscoe's was $14.76 per thousand. And then you combine this with nothing else factored in, the tax rate would be $15.33 a thousand. Clearly, that's not going to work for the folks in Roscoe. They're going to say, oh, I don't think so. But that is before we factor in these savings and additional revenue that we talked about in table 7.26, the table we just finished. So we take year one and we reduce the levy because we're going to either save money or have additional revenue. So here's the tax levy, total dollars the district has asked its voters for, right there. And we reduced it by this number, by 1.170 million, leaving a balance of levy of 13,389,329. So that levy would yield a tax rate on true of $14.10, which is less than either one of the two districts. I'm going to ask them specifically on this table. Any questions on this table? Kind of a lot going on. So the takeaway is the point I just made. The takeaway is that based on all of the projections that we pulled together, the tax rates can be reduced in emergency. So one of the things we talked about last month too, just as a reminder, one way to look at this is to say in a merged district, how long would it take me if I'm currently a Manor resident or I'm currently a Roscoe resident? If we merge and I'm able to save some money on my taxes, how long would it take with an assumed annual increase? How long would it take to get back to where I am today? So in Livingston Manor, it would take 7 years to get back to slightly above where you are today. In Roscoe, because we started from a bit lower point, it would take 4 years to get back to where we are today. So you would have quite a number of years of savings before you got back to even where you were in 21, 22, let alone any increases going forward from that point in the two districts. So this slide, we didn't always use this slide, but we found that this is a question that community members almost always have. It's like, well, all right, we talk about true value tax rates, and that's all well good, but what does it mean for you? So I've actually taken the spreadsheet that I used to use when I worked in districts that most districts use today and incorporated the numbers for this merged district, using all of those assumptions that we built on up until this point in time. So, oops, sorry. So this number at the bottom, that's that 13,389 total levy from the page before. Okay, there's your tax levy. So now what I've done is taken the assessed values, values in each of the towns. I've applied the equalization rates, and that is the way in which you determine each town's share of the total of district levy. So what this says is, in a merged district, each of these towns, and we did this last month, but here's again, because it is important. Each of these towns, this would be the share that Andy's would have of this total levy. It's a small piece of the total levy. And so on down through here. Rockland, obviously, in a merged district, we have about half of the responsibility of the tax levy. Okay? So like that forward, this one column here says, all right, so this would be the tax rate on assessed now. So now we're talking about a number that someone could take and say, all right, my house is assessed at X dollars. What might it look like in the event of a merger? Okay, so person living in the town of Andes has an equalization rate of 100%. So that would be their rate. If we go down through here further, these districts, Neptune, for example, has a very low equalization rate, therefore a very high tax rate per dollar of assess, because their assessments are very low in dollars. So again, if all that's why you have to use the equalization rate to work with assessments. These are the current 21-22 most current had actual tax rates. So let's Savannah, Roscoe, and you can see what the differences are. Right? So the point at the bottom, the tax bill based on assessed value for property owners can be reduced in all counties. And then next slide. So I just said, all right, Town Rock, both districts have property in Town Rock. You can see that there are 3 towns currently in which the current districts have property line in those 2 towns. So I just picked Rockland because it was the town with the most property in it, was Suffolk County. And I said, I'm in my properties in Livingston Manor, I'm in the town of Rockland. I have a property that's assessed at $100,000. So currently, I'm going to pay, but there's one man, I'm going to pay $2,618, and in the merge district, I'm going to pay $2,350. The savings of $161.68 a year, about 10% in that example. So then I said, all right, if I'm currently in the Roscoe district, still in Colorado, same assessed value, the number, because Roscoe's tax rate is slightly less, so it starts at 2,461, it would drop to 2,350, same number, This time, because we started at a lower point, the savings is about $100 down to $40. And you can do that for any accounts, again, using this as an estimate based on the assumptions that we work through all of the chapters that we go through. So, we'll put questions at the end, but that's the end of the financial pieces. We want to recap the study timeline, and then I'm going to hand it over to Alan to do closing comments. The meeting does and then we'll do questions. We'll start with questions from the committee, and then we'll do questions from the public. So we're about halfway through this chart right now. This is table. We started at Alan and I were here in December. I did a presentation before the boards agreed that they wanted to do a study. We started actual committee meetings in March. Study was completed in July, that would be tonight. We take any feedback from the committee tonight, any corrections for our data, maybe flawed in some way. We think we've got it all right now. And I really do appreciate everyone giving that feedback as we've gone along. Because it just makes it better in the end. We will, over the next week or so, get any last minute cleanup as far as spacing and all that sort of stuff taken care of. We will then submit it still in draft form to State Education Department for their review, which is what happens here. So they've asked for a month to do their review. During that time, there will be a point at which they do a conference call or a Zoom meeting with Alan and I and their representatives there, and they will go in surprising detail through this report and ask us to make any changes. I'll give you my favorite example, and I don't know which way it was, but I had used the term state aid or building aid or incentive operating aid throughout the report in the financial chapters, right? Exactly. thinking in my mind. And I think they were not capitalized. And they said, well, it's a specific kind of aid, so we really want you to capitalize going all the way through the chapter. So that's the big deal. This is my way of thinking what we'll do. So that happens in August. They'll meet with us. We'll take their feedback and do what they ask us to do. And usually it is small things. I mean, it's things like that. It's not something we change because the data is what the data is. We might ask for a different table structure, something like that. But they did that in August. We made our changes, and we'll be back to present to a meeting of the joint board on September 12th. I'm not sure which building right now, I don't know that we've decided that, but we'll be back one last time in that format. And we'll share much like what we've done tonight with this summary of the chapters with the board. And then that's our handoff really to all of you at that point. Our work is done. You may remember Alan talking about the 2 phases, the study phase, and then the state education department phase. So the study phase really extended, once we present the studies report, we're here for questions and all of that, but we're really going to hand it over to the districts, to the district superintendent, your district superintendent at all the both things, and state education department to work with you through the remainder of the process. So September, October, you have 2 weeks there. That's a little misleading because public information discussion has really been happening for months. I mean, this information is put on your websites. This information, we're doing all this in public forum one way or another. So gathering the public information and listening and discussing, that 2 weeks to do that. And then on October 4th, the 2 individual boards will decide whether or not they want to move forward with putting a referendum in front of their respective communities for a vote about merging. So that's again, stealing Al's thunder. You may remember him talking about 6 votes way back at the beginning of this. So these are the first 2 of 6 votes, right? Each board has to vote. So that's the 2 votes. Then if they decide that they want to go forward, they want to hear what their communities think about this, then October 26th is the date that has been identified and approved or put into SED's timeline. October 26th is the advisory referendum. So there's both numbers 2 and 3 and 4. So the Roscoe community will vote, the Louis Manor community will vote. And if the vote is positive in each of the 2 districts, now you don't add them together. Roscoe is positive yes or no. Louis Manor is more yes or no. Then you move on to the next piece, and that is on December 14th would be the final referendum, which would be the 5th and 6th vote of those 6 votes that we've been talking about. This one is just as it says, it's advisory, it's not binding. This one is binding on December 14th. And again, if at any point in those 6 votes, one district says no, that's it. No. So if it's positive all the way through all those 4 votes, 6 votes, then on July 1st of 2023, there is a new district. Remember, it's a new district. It's not one district being added to another. It is a centralization. It is a new district. So that's the timeline that we're about halfway through. So I'm going to okay. So partner time says let's do some comments, thoughts. I don't have any questions. I can make comments, thoughts, observations, things, whatever. Questions from the community. I'm just worried about people in remote land being able to hear with the fans and so on. So either we'll walk around with a microphone or you guys will to see if this should be done. I think we have a working one. So committee, I know this is rehashing things that you've seen before. You may feel like maybe not even say, yeah, I got it. I'm good. But if you still have questions, please, feel free. Big John run around.
I see that on September 12th, the study is presented to the boards. They will have a little ask the board and does the merger committee, are they part of that conversation or did only you go to the board?
So the committee doesn't have an active role in that. We certainly would welcome and encourage the committee to attend that meeting. It's a single meeting, right, of two boards coming, much like it was back in December, where the two boards each meet a meeting, but they're together. And then we will do a presentation very much like what we've just done for you, for them.
Because I have to tell you, I was a little disappointed that as a committee, we did not meet and discuss the pros and cons. Wanted us to go this forward. I would have liked to know the committee members more. I don't know any of them, I don't know. And we could have got to know them more since we're going to be in the same business. And it would have been nice to have some discussion on pros and cons and get the feedback of how everybody was feeling. Because I have to be honest, when we first came in here, I was pretty much gung-ho on this. Now I'm not so sure. So they have really changed me a little bit. So I would have loved to have heard everybody else's opinion.
Yeah, it's not uncommon for us to do that or to try to do that. I do think that timeline has limited us a little bit in our ability to do that, so I get what you're saying. We had the one meeting that we didn't have, and we tried to compress it. And, in hindsight, maybe we should have tried to reschedule that. I don't know. We certainly can do some of that tonight. There's no reason we can't. We're 7:45. It's, we've got a little bit of time. We certainly can break out into some small groups right now and do exactly that. Again, this is the committee's time right now.
What you're talking about is not unusual. You may remember at the end of the last meeting, we asked the group whether or not you wanted to have another meeting between last time and tonight.
And I said, no, I'll be on vacation.
Right, but the group pretty much said, no, we're good. And so we understand it, right?
Any other thoughts on it?
So with the incentive operating, I think we know the numbers are from 2006, 2007, which actually, Jillian, that's probably the year that you were born, right? Yeah. So my question is, do you foresee the state using more current years if they really want districts to merge? So, for instance, would they entertain using operating aid from 2018, 2019?
That was one of the questions we asked the state ed people when they were here in the first meeting. And they were pretty adamant that that was the numbers that were set for these purposes, and they did not envision any revisiting.
I was thinking statutory, is it not?
Yeah, it's in the law.
It's in the law.
Right, I'm just to make it a real incentive.
There appears to be, as John just said, there appears to be no predisposition on their part to look at that. And, I suspect it would vary too, but it might help some districts. Yeah, that's.
I asked that in separate meetings with state ed, I've asked that too, and they were pretty adamant, that's what's in the statute, that's the formula they use, and don't expect it to change. Because my question was, you know, could that go down, or could it, you know, and they were pretty adamant that that's what it is, that's kind of what, you know.
Right, well, it's like that game show, people are known, you want to make sure a better deal is not going to be offered, you know, 2 years down the road, and then you signed on for, you know, December.
One of the things they did say is that enrollment played a big factor in that, so like that was saying is that may not help us if they use more recent numbers, because enrollment has gone down significantly in both districts since 06, 07.
I mean, that's a fixed number. I mean, you can go to the A report to look at that. I mean, not that it's going to change anything, but I can do that. You know, 15 minutes. But I don't see any reason to believe that state ed is going to suggest a statutory change.
I mean, one thing that we had talked about, and we had also asked state ed about is if, you know, to your point, if it's really an incentive, you know, use more accurate up-to-date numbers. Another part of it is the two votes, the advisory referendum and the binding referendum. The advisory referendum that is scheduled to occur in October is not required by law. It's required by state ed. It's not required by law. So we have to do it, but it's not written in law any place. It's just a state ed requirement, which, you know, we've discussed with the state ed people, and I've also discussed with our elected officials, senator and assembly members, to say, you know, look, if, you know, the state really wants to see these things go through, why require multiple votes? If there's, you know, if a lot of work has been done, and the information is there, why make communities vote twice? And their response was that it's a lot of work for state ed, so we want to make sure that communities really want to do this before they do the work on their end. Is that
For the past 14 years.
for the password?
Other any folks, comments, or questions, observations?
My question is, more directed toward you, Mr. Evans. Going forward, you already have you share with the community as far as how to get all this information out together. Because I still feel like there's a very small number of people that show up to these meetings, and there's so many people that still are making comments outside of these meetings. You know, I just don't want to see the hospital building closed. I would like to see this happen, and all of which happen in these forums, but yet people aren't showing up to these meetings. The information just isn't getting.
That's a great question and a great point. The conversations that I've had with both boards is that once the study is complete, you know, so this part of it, you know, for this group is wrapped up for now, it goes to state ed, you know, when it comes back is, since people didn't come to us, going to them. Getting a couple board members or a couple community members or anybody who wants to be involved and going out to fire departments, ambulance corps, libraries, Rotary, Kiwanis, any community groups, organizations, places that have a meeting and would, you know, welcome us to come, to basically come with the study in hand and, you know, kind of using the key takeaways for each of these topics, you know, basically present the study and the information and answer questions the best that we can. Because I agree, you know, it's open, it's there, it's on the website. but the level of involvement has not been huge. But since they didn't come to us, we're to them.
Quick question regarding the vote. Is the referendum for county board members 5, 7, or 9? Is that included in one of the votes, and are there other referendums that can be added, such as if that was a concern about closing, referendum and then saying, the board did not make that decision, that would have to go to a public vote.
Answer that. So from the meeting when State Ed was here, what they explained is in that December vote, in that binding referendum vote, they would be voting for two things: the yes or no on the merger, and then a 5, 7, or 9 member board. So that would occur at the December one, and then the next vote, if those are, that is yes in December, then it would immediately go, and these are ones where the October one and the December one aren't on Allen and Devon, they aren't as much on the district as they are on the district superintendent and State Ed. They're involved in organizing and setting up and overseeing those two votes. That's correct.
Just so, when I heard, so I can be fair to what I heard, I guess. On October 4th, each board will hold a public vote about whether or not to have this question presented to their communities. The Roscoe board will vote, the Livingston Manor board will vote separately. In order for it to go to the communities, it would have to pass each board with a majority of votes. It's a 5-member board. They have to be 3 to 2, 4 to 1, or 5 to 0. There has to be more yeses than noes on the vote, on the board vote, then it would go to the communities. Talk about the advisory vote, the final vote. God is correct. If you get to that final on December 14th, the questions will be, should the districts merge? Number 2, how many board members should the merged district have, 5, 7, or 9? And the only other question is, how long will the terms be? 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? There are 3 questions on that December vote. And so the communities decide that, those 3 questions. If the merger vote passes in both communities, then you look to the answer to number 2, how many board members should there be? And number 3, how long should the terms be? If the community vote fails on merger, you don't even look at the other 2 questions, because it's over. So that's how you get down the road, and that's what gives the new district its structure from a governance standpoint.
So yeah, if it passes in December, then in January, that 5, 7, or 9 member board, it would be an election held to elect a new board of education, which would then go through the process of doing everything involved in creating the new district and putting together the budget that would be voted on in May for the new district that would start in July.
And the state education department presents, the study to the board, board and Boston board will be present, and that will be open to the public at that time.
That's the September 12th. That's you guys present.
Right, state education department, you won't see them until it's voted. That and I will do the presentation on September 12th. Have we finalized that?
That was a tentative one that Jay gave us for the
Somewhere
time.
around there.
Yeah, that would be just like the December meeting where both boards meet in the same place, open to the public. And I would expect that would be a kind of more in-depth overview of kind of what we just did tonight.
Yeah, it's not gonna be anything new. It's kind of like tonight. If there was anything new tonight, we didn't do our job in the first 4 or 5 meetings. Same with the board. This all builds on itself. So from the enrollment projections in the first meeting up to the impact on the tax rate, all that stuff we reported on tonight, and that's what we'll talk to the board about also. Maybe some tweaks, but there's not gonna be anything terribly exciting that we didn't hear tonight.
So some of the steps from the district side that we've been taking since this process started, is working with the communication service. And by the start of next school year, our newsletters and specific newsletters relating to the study of these votes, are going to be mailed to all district residents. Currently, the newsletters, for the most part, for the parents and to any community members that ask for them, we don't have a process that hits every single district resident. So because of this, and because of exactly what we just asked for, you know, we've taken the steps to make sure that by the time we get to this point, there's a mechanism in place so that this information hits every district resident in both districts, you know, at their mailbox. Since the robocall, for the most part, for the parents, you know, this way it's not a targeted audience, and but it only hits if you're a parent or have a student in the local school, or you're an emergency contact. So your emergency contact, that's when you get the calls. But yeah, so having a better communication system in place so that all the residents get something in their mailbox that has this information and points them to where they can see all the stuff that's on the website.
Any other, oh,
I know the question came up about how to roll out the whole publicity in this merger. And we do a blog party in September where we do get very much parents and families. And I think those are the majority of people that are really make difference between the parents and children that come to school. I think that's a really good place to showcase some of this. I don't know who this is.
So, yeah, back to the traveling roadshow part, you know, once we have the study back from Spain, because right now it's a draft prepared by the consultants. Once State kind of gives it its blessing, you know, then that's the document that becomes the traveling roadshow for the open houses, or, you know, whatever's going on in the community. That's a tentative from state ed. You know, they said, give us at least a month. So we might.
is there a date for time?
What's that?
Don't forget students also in terms of voters. We talk about
Yeah.
voting blocks, if you will,
Student voters.
who are 18.
Then is there the event that you were talking about, is that date then established? It's usually the end of September.
Yeah, it's usually mid to late September.
Okay, so one would think that we would have it show. Any other committee questions, thoughts?
This question's for you guys. I'm referencing the 94 study. It talks about the straw poll vote, which is the October 26th, right? It says a straw poll vote can be taken in a variety of ways, such as a petition, mailing, or survey. It is needed to determine whether residents in those districts support the merger. Do all three of those forms will bring forward, or we, and if so, have we chosen one that will have to do this straw poll?
I don't believe so, but that, again, we are, that's handled by somebody else. That's handled by state. When you get to the voting phase, we don't have anything to do with it. We're out.
So it's not necessarily something that has to be.
I don't believe so, but you could check with Bob about
So
that.
there are ways to get that
Yes.
from.
Yeah. That was,
one of my questions with the state ed people on that. And they seem to lean towards the vote piece. There's also weird language that, you know, from day one in our conversations with state ed, there's a lot of things that state ed has kind of infused in this process that I think make it problematic from the start. You know, the point that Carmel brought up with the numbers for aid being based on 06, 07 and not being looked at. The requirement for 2 votes that aren't legally required. That one, we, at the board level, we felt it was necessary for both communities to have the opportunity to participate in that struggle. In the language surrounding the stuff from state ed, it's only required to take place in the larger district. So if you read the letter of the law, this goes back to the, you know, why do some of these things fail? Is because the way it's structured, it's not conducive to communities working together in some ways. And what we have said to the state ed people from day one, we want to plan that a vote takes place in both school buildings on the same day for the same purpose. So what that means is on the state ed side, to put together that October vote, there's an additional step on the Roscoe side where we'll need signatures on a petition to allow for a vote to take a secondary voting place. So it's weird, it's not conducive, but you know, that was something on the board side when we talked with the state ed people. They said, well, they only need one place to vote. It's not really gonna work. That doesn't, automatically alienates one community. So there will be a vote in places, it's just an additional step in the smaller district for it to have a voting site.
Anything else? Well, public, John, I can, this is maybe easier again.
Okay.
I'll head over there. Yes, let's go.
I apologize for not asking this question when we talked about tax for last meeting, but I just have a really quick clarifying question for myself. So the savings of 1.2 million, I'm not obviously, is predicated on the 1.1 million, which would be the attrition of those 8.25 positions. So if we don't see that right away, then our savings is really 110,000, so that would make it a slow roll. Is that the right way to think about that? Okay, and I have more questions, sorry, oh my God.
Yeah, so yes, you're right, that is predicated on that savings in year one, and if we could go to the table that Al, we shared tonight, with the report about the average number of average amount for over 30 years in each of the districts we were in that report. It's very likely that we may see that.
And one last question. I see that the director of technology has a strike through it, so I just was wondering where that job would fall. We need to look at technology and the Achilles heel of the organization, and I think we really found that out during COVID. So I just was wondering, is that going to someone else? Is that the outsourced? Where is that going?
It's something that would be redesigned to one of the existing, reassigned to one of the existing administrators.
called multimedia technician. Right?
Yeah, multimedia technician / technology director. On the local board, this is like 5 or 9. Will they be staggered? Something in the written language, but we're not going to have to sleep for 3 years. I think that's
Yeah, the way it happens is you determine that number of board members, let's just pick 7. And, or maybe 12 people who are seeking 7 positions. The 7 people with the highest votes are the people who are elected out of the 12. And within those 7, the 3 people, and let's say they're 3-year terms. The people with the 3 people with the highest 3 votes would get the 3-year terms. The next, I believe, 2 people highest votes would get the 2-year terms. And number 6 and number 7 would get the 1-year terms. So once you determine how many people are going to be and what the term lengths are going to be, it's the actual vote that almost creates the staggered system of replacing board members and presidents.
You're going to let them move forward in January. Continue to operate.
Yes.
Okay, and with that, is the new board bound in any way obligated to do what these 2 individual boards have proposed? Could a new board come in and say, we don't like what we're not on the committee and we're going to do something for it? Is there anything that's going to be going into the new district that says, oh, this will take place A through Z for the new board coming into the elected?
I think that's probably a question for your school attorney. I would say that is, when you say, is there any way that they could do something different? My guess is there probably is. I'm just not experienced enough to see how that might work. Essentially, what usually happens is that there is communication from January through June with the new board and the existing boards, and they work very much hand in hand. And somebody stands up from the very beginning and says, this is a difficult enough undertaking without, let's not get it wrong and trying to do the best we can. Let's do the best we can and keep our communication open. And I think the reality of it is that by the time the new board is officially in place on July 1, they've had a great deal of communication with the existing board. I understand that stop short of answering your question. Is there any way they could do something different? I would leave that to your secretary.
Like, let's say,
No, my question is, could they unmerge the district? The merging of the district is done by the voters. So, no, I don't think they.
And once you are merged, you cannot unmerge. You can, no, that's no. I know the answer to that question. No.
I didn't hear the question. The total was $54,000. We had a grant for $25,000. So the other half of that was split between the 2 districts.
Wanted to know who decided to have this study. And we got so many problems in the world. The school is closed. Given the waiting year and then bring it up with everybody still being closed. I mean, that is a question.
The decision was made by the 2 boards of education to move forward with the study.
You is now cannot guarantee us anything. But brought to us, we put it in our mind, we bring it back to the people. But when there's a merge, we can't guarantee this stuff.
Right.
It's not binding.
And when we have budget meetings, and we tell that paper what we want, and we discuss the merge on it, how is that? They want to know how is that?
That's been posted on the website since we got the results back. But what I can tell you, and the ladies over in the corner, correct me if I'm wrong, for the first two questions about whether strongly support or support on the Livingston Manor side of the people that took the survey, it was 60% of the people that took the survey strongly support or support the idea of merger. And on the Roscoe side, it was 54% strongly support or support the merger. And the next question was basically in a nutshell, on the fence, need more information. I believe it was 11 or 12% on the Livingston Manor side, on the undecided, and on the Roscoe side, it was in the low 20s. Is that close? Hold on. Okay. Support the Roscoe merger. So strongly support, Manor was 33%, Roscoe was 40%. Somewhat support, Manor was 27%, Roscoe 16%. Not sure, need more information, Manor was 16%, Roscoe was 26%. Somewhat opposed, Manor was 5%, Roscoe was 7%. Strongly opposed, Manor was 18%, Roscoe was 10%.
Or for safety, you know, if this vote actually doesn't pass, there's people running for the board. And the question is that Brian brought up, you know, how do you guarantee what's going to happen? You know, the new board is going to abide by the recommendations. Well, the public has the opportunity to vote who they want on the board. So people should make their position clear who are running for the board, that they support this, or who don't support it. They should say that, and then the public decides who they want and the direction for the community to go.
You also have to remember, there's a lot of old people that do not trust what you're doing. Do not.
That's why, Donna, that exact point is why all of this fund will be mailed to every district resident in both communities so that they have a hard copy piece of paper to look at if they don't have access to technology. And that's the same reason, so at the nursing home or whatever, if we have senior meals, any community organization that is meeting in the fall prior to these votes, I will be happy to come. I lost it. I am happy to come to whatever meeting is going on with any board members or committee members who would like to join me to make sure that this information is in the hands of all of those people that you're describing.
Just make sure, because our friends that are old, do not drive anymore, do not understand anything. When you explain something to them, well,
Hey, everyone, anybody else up here?
Just, for your question.
Let me just say that the comment about the board members is a wonderful comment. This is the 14th one that I've done. And I watched them a little bit. I watched them very closely from a study perspective, obviously. And then I kind of follow a little bit about what happens after the voting phase. And in every case that I can think of, there has been one or more adult who at the appropriate time has stood up and made a speech. And the speech was, this is a big change for our communities. Let's not lose sight of what this is all about. This is about us doing the best we can for the kids in our school district. The best thing we can do is model collaboration, cooperation, and trust as adults in how we put this school district together. So let's, just for the heck of it, have about an equal number of people from Livingston Manor running the board. It's about equal to the number of people from Roscoe running the board. Let's be clear about how we view this individually as board members. Because you're right, the leadership that comes from the adults and the board, knowing that this study is not binding on anybody, that leadership and the emergence of that leadership from the adults and the form of the board is absolutely critical to this being a positive experience, whether it passes or not, to this being a positive experience. So I just want to shine some light on your comment right now.
Just a quick follow-up. Will there be absentee ballots available, or do people have to physically go to the polls? For people who maybe were sick, but not.
That would be a state ed, since they're the ones that do both of those votes. That's something I would have to find.
I haven't. I don't know. But you have to ask out, but I can't imagine saying it's.
No, I think it's done under the same voting parameters
Yes.
that our budget votes take place. I almost think somebody asked that question at the first meeting.
I looked at my notes from the student.
Yeah.
Somebody asked that, says that since ballots are allowed for.
Okay, so in Robin's notes from that first meeting, somebody did ask that question, and the answer was yes, absentee votes, ballots are allowed for reorg votes for a school. So that December vote is the reorg vote. I don't know if that would apply to the straw vote part. But that's definitely something we could find out from the state ed votes.
But the binding vote is.
The binding vote,
I would
yes.
have to believe that it's the same as every other SED governed
Yes.
voting process.
That's the answer. That's the way I took the answer from state ed. It's done the same way your annual budget votes would be done.
Other questions, anyone?
If there's a no vote at any level, it's done.
It's the district residents, so there's no differentiation between the towns. You know, that list that was on my tax rate thing, that doesn't matter. What matters is the residents of the Livingston Manor School District, the yeses, the nos. The residents of the Roscoe School District, the yeses, the nos. And there has to be one more yes than no in each district. Towns have no bearing on that.
Yeah, you meant district, right, Donna? You meant.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I'm in the weeds, sorry.
Yeah, there's 9 towns within the 2 districts.
Yeah, yeah.
The question is,
District, yes, sorry.
so back to Alan's earlier points and the state ed points, at that board vote, at the straw vote, and at the other one, if there's a no at any level, the process stops. By either district. By either district.
Good, right? Okay. Anybody else? Clarifications, questions?
I would like to see more high school students. I think Roscoe and Mountain kids got to a goal support meeting. And tell them how important it is to have programs that one's listening out, one's getting. Just a thought to bring them.
want to wrap it up or if you want.
Is there any online?
No. Okay, with that.
Lawyer, both school, the second school.
Both schools have the same law firm. The law firm, there's a team of lawyers, but it's the same law firm.
So if there are no more questions or comments, let me just offer a couple of closing comments. Not prepared remarks, but just closing comments. Let me add my thanks to Debs for those of you who served on this advisory committee. You put in a lot of time. You've probably been hit by a lot of different questions from people outside of what's going on. And the commitment that you've made to your communities is one that should be celebrated. Your communities owe you a real debt of gratitude for the time you have put in on this committee, and our thanks certainly goes to you from Bevan, from me as chief of your communities. Let me also thank the attendees, the audience who's been with us. We've had, I know there are tons, I'm sure there are tons of people that don't know what's going on here. On the positive side, we've had really good-sized crowds at a lot of these meetings. People who have shown their interest, not being committee members, but have shown their interest, who have made comments, who have sought information, and we thank you for your presence here as well. So we're going to leave here tonight, and this includes the study phase for us, short of the presentation to the board sometime a couple of weeks into September. As I think back to some of the comments that I would have made the first meeting that we had here, I would suggest that some of the comments I made are still true, and I'm sure at that time I would have said, these merger studies are complex undertakings. There's a lot to this, probably a lot more than some people understood when they began. These are very complicated undertakings. I'm sure I would have said that in any merger study that we've ever done, there are always some pluses and there are always some areas for concern in any study, and I think we find that here as well. Our hope for you would be that as you leave here and go out in your communities and discuss the future of your two school districts, you do so with great thought and with great kindness, never forgetting that this is about providing the best opportunities you have for your students. These are tough issues. These are very personal, very emotional issues that you're going to be discussing. And it is, in my mind, easy to see how different people can come to these issues from very different perspectives. If you are a young parent with young children who are just starting in this school district, you may see the opportunities associated with this study and other. And yet, if you're a senior citizen whose grandchildren are through the district, you may be saying, why are we doing all this stuff with our kids? We don't need this. We have different perspectives. Understand that people can come to this discussion from very different places. Respect the people that share their opinions with you. Give them your time. Give them your understanding. It's a very emotional undertaking, but it need not be something that pulls communities apart, rather than tend to pull communities together. People that see this differently than you see this are not bad people. They just may see it from a different perspective. So we would urge you to go out and spread the word, talk about what you've learned here. If you think it's a good idea, tell people you think it's a good idea. If you think it's a bad idea, tell people why you think it's a bad idea. But our ask would be that
conversations that take place from this point on will be done with the best interests of the students of Livingston Manor and Roscoe Hart. And as communities, we use this as an opportunity to bring communities together. So thank you again. Something to think about. Ed and I will hang around, and John is going to make last minute comment.
So, to Lily's question before, and this is to the committee. Between now and, before the board would make a decision, what are your thoughts on, and this is something that I'll take to the two boards at their next meetings, if this is a direction that the committee wants to go. Last week we had focus groups set up where anybody that wanted to come and talk about, ask questions, that kind of stuff. We had a virtual event, we had two, in-person events at both schools, very, very poorly attended. So my question to this group is, would we want to set up something in early September where it's kind of like an open panel discussion involving board members, involving this group, basically talking and asking questions about the study document itself?
I think that's a good idea, for sure, but maybe having a way for people, like, honestly, submit questions as well. Some people may not know what I do, like, I know students, like, this is something I wish I would have done sooner, because we were, maybe, like, come up with something for high school students as well, like, submit questions, because it's kind of hard to get it out there. You'll look at the website, I may not know about, like, questions, like, different meetings and, like, ways to ask questions, but they may have questions. So I definitely think this is a good idea.
One of the things, the student involvement question was something that I was also thinking about, is setting up a way through the student governments in each district, if we can get, kind of like just like you're saying, Jillian, someone else for all the students in both districts, questions, comments, concerns, that can be addressed, at like another forum.
I think it's a good idea. I'd be supportive of that. It probably doesn't make sense to do before the boards vote. If the boards both vote to move forward with it, then do it before the advisory level. But I don't really understand the point of it.
I was kind of thinking it more to inform the board's decision on whether there's community support to move forward or not. That was kind of why I was thinking before that board vote. But I see your point as well. The boards don't vote yes, but I think that this could provide useful information to the boards to make that decision.
I mean, not all the board members are here, and it will give them time to. I think if we give the board some time to absorb everyone's questions in the meetings. These meetings have been wonderful. They're giving us, the focus goals. That's obviously a lot of work, but I think everyone has to voice their feeling and the board has to listen. So I really think there has to be something in between here before they make a decision. I mean, it's just setting it up.
That was my feeling as well. I think there should be a step in between this and the board making decisions so they can hear from the committee and, and if anybody can think of other ways we can get more community involvement, I think that's critically important too. Because it seems like everybody has a voice, but only a handful of people are brave enough to come here and share.
That was another question that people want to know, the committee and the board members getting together, talk to John.
No, there have been, every meeting that has occurred in this forum, in this arena, in public. There have been no secret committee meetings, there have been no secret board meetings, there's no. Yeah, and that's kind of what we're talking about now, is creating another meeting in public, open to everybody, just like they all have been, but not necessarily led by Alan and Deb, just facilitated by the two boards in the school districts to hear from the committee and hear from the community. And get feedback from students, yeah. But part of it's one of those things, if we want student feedback, you know, we have to wait until September because then we have a captive audience. Right now, it's pretty hard to get feedback from students.
What were you envisioning for the public information and discussion in September and October? Would that be?
That's the
something-
traveling roadshow stuff. That's,
Okay, so it's not necessarily
it's not a set date. That's a whole
Okay,
series
that's
of,
what I was wondering, because if it was, then you could consider doing somewhat of a format like this with your work sitting front and center and public background when everyone is here together.
that, exactly what you're describing is, you know, that time period in between, you know, when people need to make a decision and cast a vote. I think there need to be a series of forums that people have the opportunity, and even after the one in October. So if the straw poll is yes, and it's moving to the next step, then the same traveling road shows that occurred before the October votes need to occur again before December. Just so, you know, one of the things that has been kind of my standing orders from both boards is to make sure that this entire process is as public and as transparent and engages as many people as possible so people can make informed decisions. And, you know, that's kind of the whole point we want to keep going with is, you know, can this group and can the boards set up enough meetings to make sure that, you know, everybody has that information.
Another idea would be to do during them for 7 through 12 students and have the board and questions and discuss. If you want to get the kids involved, then we will try to find ways to get some people. Yeah, do it during the school. And you only might have to do that with the adults. That helps.
Well, John, what classes of class advisors, maybe the class advisors can speak to their students and for separate students, right? They have class advisors, they get kids to come to us.
Well, yeah, and that's what I said, once school is back in session, we have a captive audience and we can orchestrate things in both districts to get feedback from kids. And we also have a captive audience on conference days with staff. You know, so putting together time for staff to engage and talk and get feedback from staff and from students is something that as districts, we can do once we resume back in September. Other thoughts, comments, questions? I just want to thank Alan and Deb for their work. The committee, a couple different times, sent them back to the drawing board with a couple different issues. So, you know, we appreciate, you know, you guys, you know, taking direction from this group and doing all the legwork to get the answers to their questions. I know I have found the process very educational and enlightening. You know, and I think, you know, the level of engagement from the committee, you know, on behalf of both boards, thank you. This was a lot of time, it was a lot of energy, it makes us, but, you know, I think it's important, like Alan said, you know, you guys had firsthand involvement
in all of these meetings and all of these conversations. So kind of being that contact point for community members or staff members, or students, you know, to give them the information and point them, you know, to where they can find information, or point them to me. You know, I'll help them get access, and, you know, not the ones that don't have technology access. I can get, there's stacks of the PowerPoint presentation, and I can get you stacks of the hard copy document for them as well. Thank you guys very much, Alan and Deb, thank you again. And please make some cookies. For the presentation.
Thank you.